Wes Durham of the ACC Network. Welcome, Wes. You have any favorite wrestling theme songs from back in the day? We're rocking out to wrestling all week here.
Not off the top of my head. Favorite wrestlers, yes. Favorite theme songs, I'm not sure that when I watch wrestling, there was theme songs.
Okay.
But anyway.
Who's your guy from way back, Wes? Give us one.
God, there were. Well, if you grew up in the South, Dusty Rhodes is part of your culture. That's number one. I was also a Rufus R. Freight Train Jones guy. He was on the Mid-Atlantic Championship circuit, not on the precursor in the Northeast that I guess became WWE. But Rufus R. Freight Train Jones and Dusty Rhodes are probably the two guys. There was also a guy named Tony Atlas who was built like an atlas, as you can imagine, right? One of those Greek god-looking guys that I always thought was pretty cool, too. So, I was in my 20s before I went to my first wrestling match.
Okay.
Brian.
I'll say this, Wes. You don't know this. You also just accidentally teased our Syracuses event on Saturday because Tony Atlas will be here on Saturday.
Are
Wes.
you serious?
I do not lie. Tony Atlas will be here on Saturday at the fairgrounds. So yeah, your guy will be up here this week. So
how about that, Tony? How old is Tony Atlas?
I mean, I think he's in his 70s now. He's still kicking around.
He's gotta be.
Yeah. How old is he? He's been. I've not had him on the show yet. He's been kicking around some of our other shows. 69. 69 is Tony Atlas, but he's still.
Wow.
In the wrestling world, 69 might as well be 140. So like Tony's doing good. He'll be here.
But is he from New York? He's not from the Northeast, is he?
No. Let's see. Now I've Googled him. He was born many moons ago in Roanoke, Virginia.
That's what I thought. He's a Mid-Atlantic guy, so yeah, okay, there you go.
No,
makes sense.
We're bringing together all types and all kinds here on Saturday.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but glad to have Wes with us. First off, I'm sorry to see, Wes, from your Instagram that you got unsatisfactory hotel service here. Said you got a Popeyes box and a pile of sheets. Like I don't know, but I apologize for the whole city of Syracuse for you on that one.
I debated whether I was going to do it or not. My wife laughed because she was with me on the trip this weekend. And after the game on Saturday night, she said, if we get back after dinner and, and it's still there, you probably by then it's 2 full days and, you've gone through the deal with the front desk and housekeeping. She goes, it's probably worth it. I said, okay. So that was the only reason I did it. And you noticed that I kept the guilty out of the tweet or the text, if you will, or the post. So, but yeah, I thought it was funny when I got there on Friday and laughed when I left on Sunday morning, as they say, Brian.
That's impressive. That I get housekeeping doesn't pop by every day anymore, like the old days. But man, like when you tell them it's sitting there,
right?
Twice. You'd think they'd do something about it. I had one a few years ago, Wes. We showed up to the room before a football game. There was no pillows on any of the beds. Like where did the pillows go? Like, so I called out, like, thankfully it was the first thing I did. I called down to the front desk. I'm like, hey, Paulie and I were rooming together that trip. We have no pillows. Can you bring up some pillows? And they brought pillows up. The next day, I found out the same thing happened in a lot of rooms. Adam Terry had no pillows. He slept on like a rolled up towel, I'm like, man, I didn't know. I would have shared an extra pillow.
Just call the front desk, Adam. It isn't hard. You just call
Adam called. Apparently, like we had claimed the last pillows. Like they were flat out of. Like you're a hotel. How do you out of pillows? It's your whole business.
How do you out of pillows?
Yeah,
especially and they know you're coming. That's the other thing too. It's like. And I know we're off the track here a little bit, but it's not like when a football team shows up at a hotel, it's a surprise. It's not like the local band playing at the Knights of Columbus. I mean, it's like a football team is showing up.
Yeah.
It's they know you're coming. You've got 100 of rooms or however many you take to house a football team these days. Probably more than you did when I started this, but. Yeah, no, that is comedy right there that they had no pillows.
Yeah, I'm glad I noticed because I don't think I would have handled that very well. Anyway, Wes Durham is with us. Now that we got our hotel issues out of the way, you were here, which means you were at the game on Saturday, and you saw what I thought, Wes, and it was a pretty impressive performance by Syracuse on Saturday night against NC State. What did you make of not a wire-to-wire, but a close enough to that win on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, it was, for me, having watched a handful of their games and, more recently, start to finish than the stuff in the early part of the year, And then measuring it kind of statistically within the night, I thought it was probably as good as they played. Certainly on offense, right? I mean, I think they were. I thought they were effective in transition. I thought they took a pressured defensive team at NC State and really kind of took them out of what they want to do, Brian, to be honest with you. So I thought it was a terrific effort for Coach Autry and his team. And then in particular, I would tell you that Mintz delivered what I thought we were going to see from Judah Mintz, but I was incredibly impressed with J.J. Starling. I thought that I thought he gave them a lift early from a scoring perspective. I thought he and Mintz played well together. And I give Judah a lot of credit on a night where he could have probably gone and gotten 25 to 30. I thought he got a lot of guys involved, and I thought, you know what, that might be the maturation of him as a distributor of the ball, and maybe a guy who is, you know, kind of seeing the bigger picture for certainly the second half of the ACC when it starts next week.
Yeah, we've seen that now from Judah basically twice in the last 3 games. The Miami game a week prior, he had the 13 assists, which was a career high. And then Florida State just doesn't let you do that, and he couldn't really pass it to anybody. He scored 28 against them, and we saw how that went for Syracuse. You know, I said this earlier today, Wes, and maybe I'll set North Carolina outside this because they look like they might be reasonably separated from the pack this year. It feels like if Judah and JJ are cooking, like the Orange can hang with anyone in this league right now.
Yeah, it does feel like they give them, at least from a ball handling perspective, maybe 1A, 1B in the ACC, right, in terms of backcourt. You know, and I don't know, Brian, what the magic number is going to be, and I think the magic number of them combined from a scoring perspective probably got to change a lot. But on the whole, I was really, really impressed. I thought that, you know, I know Benny Williams has just been the most discussed Syracuse player of all time in some respect the last couple of years. But I was impressed with the way he came off the bench. I really like the way Malik Brown does his job. And when I say do his job, I think Malik Brown, for an undersized 5 guy, does a terrific job of impacting the game, getting rebounds, doing the stuff that frees other guys to play winning basketball. I think he is, and I didn't get this from Jerry or Adrian or anybody else, but I would say that to me, outside of the guys that score it, Starling, Mintz, you know, obviously Bell occasionally, that kind of thing, I would tell you that I think Malik Brown might be the most important player Syracuse has on the floor. I mean, at all times.
You know, Wes, I agree with you. And the reason, you know, I kind of separate that from Judah and JJ is because regardless of stats, and Malik, you know, he took 1 shot in the game.
Right,
you did.
exactly.
I say regardless of stats, I feel so confident Malik's going to deliver something every night that I don't even really include him in the winning formula because you almost just mark that down as, you know, fate accomplished before the game starts.
Sure, and I think you've got it in perspective a little bit, and I'll give you perspective just based on Saturday night. Because DJ Burns did not start the ball game. Now, Kevin Keats talked to us about, you know, potentially changing the lineup and, you know, trying to do some different things. NC State is, I think, a very good defensive team, not a great shooting team, and they have a fascinating inefficiency to rebound the basketball. It's just one of those things when you look at it on the stat sheet, you're like, how are they not a better rebounding team outside of Mohamed Diarra, who typically comes off the bench but started the other night? I thought that Malik Brown handled the fact that, like, the guy who typically impacts the game offensively was not on the floor to start the game in Burns, at least in terms from an interior perspective, Brian. And I thought Malik Brown took the challenge of Diarra's rebounding presence personally and impacted the game his own way. And I give him a lot of credit for that, and certainly the coaches in terms of the way they prep the lineup for that too.
Wes Durham with us of ACC Network. What do you make of Red Autry here in the first year? And, you know, you look at Hubert Davis and John Shire. There's a lot of legend replacing in this league recently.
Absolutely. And the thing I like about him is that he's the same guy as the head coach that he was as the assistant coach in many respects. Easy conversationalist, very approachable in terms of what he's about. You know, the conversations I had with he and Jerry, both when they were assistants with Coach Boeheim, are the same conversations we can have now. I do think he has the authority, you know, part worked out just fine in terms of being the head coach. I think he's a guy that can lead this team. I think he and Jerry have done a terrific job, I tweeted out about Jerry and his little shooting tips with J.J. Starling at the shoot-around on Saturday that, whether or not the tune-up produced the career high, nonetheless, I think it worked. The second part is that I think the synergy about that staff, Brian, is half the battle. I think it's one of the reasons that Hubert Davis and John Shire were successful in their first years. I think it's one of the reasons Red will ultimately be successful, not just this year, but I think on the long haul as Syracuse's head coach.
Yeah, it'll be something if all three of them can have success, because we know how hard it is to to follow any of those, right?
Guys. Yeah, and I think, but Brian, here's the thing. I think to Coach Boeheim, Coach Williams, and Coach K's credit, they all kind of, I don't want to say they painted the runway for them here, because you just don't walk off the job, particularly in Jim's case and Mike's case, being at one place 40 or more years, right? But even with Roy and the heritage of Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge at Chapel Hill, I think that they all do. The three institutions share the common ground of having a rock-solid basketball culture, and that can't be overlooked now in today's college athletics. The pieces that are moving are all the intangible stuff, the outside things, right? But that culture, that fundamental philosophy that those programs are established with, I think that makes it, probably proper in many respects that guys like Hubert and John, and certainly Red in this particular case at Syracuse, are the guys that are following those legendary figures.
Yeah. I mean, some semblance of consistency, like you just don't see it anywhere. Look at college football. Like, there's 4 teams in the playoffs. 3 of them have different coaches right now than they did 2 weeks ago.
No
so it's wild how fast it changes. As Wes Durham is with us from ACC Network. What do you make of the league right now, Wes? I think Joe Lenardi's bracketology the other day, and he does it by the book and by the numbers. He had
what's his name again?
Yeah.
What's that guy's name again?
He had 3 ACC teams in the bracket. Like the eye test and the numbers are not meeting in a meaningful way right now. How do you parse it? It's weird.
Well, Brian, I'll tell you this. I think the net is a fault-driven narrative. I think that, look, I give Joe a lot of credit. He's turned something we all do in every office in America in March into a vocation, right? And he's created interest in it. I think it's a little bit like college football playoff bracketing, though, in the month of September with the AP poll. I think we're wasting our time here, because when it gets right down to it, the ACC's having a really good year. This whole narrative about, Rothstein tweeting out the other day about the ACC may potentially only get 2 teams. That's just ridiculous.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's just insanity, and John knows better. But, you want to drive clicks and drive clicks. I believe the league is in a really good situation. You're looking at the top 50 tonight. You got, 6 in the top 50 today of the net. They're 3 in the 40s, and then you got Duke and Carolina and Clemson, in the front 30, right? And I think you're obviously going to have a War Daddy game on Saturday night in Chapel Hill with Carolina and Duke. But I also believe, too, that there are teams like Wake Forest in this particular case, who I'm really excited about, kind of excited about where, in all honesty, I think Virginia is. I think Virginia's starting to really round into form. The way I keep Clemson in this is because Clemson's got as good a non-conference slate in terms of wins, Brian, as anybody, right? You win at Alabama, you beat TCU, you've really put some nice numbers up there. I wouldn't discount Syracuse. I was just doing some figuring here this afternoon for our game tomorrow night. Syracuse is 5-4 in the ACC, and the teams they've played in the ACC, and I know they've played, Pitt twice and maybe one other team twice. The 9 games they've played are against teams that have gone a combined 46 and 34 in the league. So that's that's almost 58%. And right now, I've only done about 4 or 5 schools. That's the best.
Oh, mid-sentence we lost Wes. Hopefully we can get Wes back on to finish. I feel that sentence was about to be something very important for Syracuse. So Wes dropped out mid-huge factoid for Syracuse. That was like a stat that was going to be really good. But I assume that's based on, Syracuse has played Duke, played Carolina, and played Virginia already, and right now they're the top 3 teams in the league when you look at winning percentage in the league. So that's how you lead to something like that halfway through the conference slate here. That's how you get something like that halfway through the conference slate. And you look at the rest of the way, Syracuse plays Carolina. They don't have to play Duke again. They don't have to play Virginia again. So hopefully that will get to something good going forward where you can win some more of these games down the line. That was a dramatic exit. Wes is on his way. He's between Atlanta and Clemson. He's got the Clemson-Boston College game tomorrow night. So hopefully we'll get Wes back on here for a final thought or two in the second. It was a very, like we were talking about wrestling to start. In wrestling, you kind of get the dramatic entrance. That was a very dramatic exit. That was a very dramatic exit. All right, here we go. Wes, you vanished like midway through a stat that I think was very good for Syracuse, so we need to get you on to finish it here.
Well, Syracuse is where I'm going with Syracuse. I was telling you about doing this notation work, and my math's never been great, but Syracuse's opponents in conference, Syracuse is 5-4. And this is what John and Joe and those guys aren't accounting for. Syracuse's opponents are 57.5%. They're 46-34 combined in the ACC. So, I mean, that's not a terrible number. Mm-hmm. And in fact, right now, the handful of schools I've done, that's the best number out there. Now, Florida State's 6-3. They play teams that are combined in ACC play 45-34, so that's just percentage points off. Mm-hmm. Duke, for instance, is 6-2, right? Duke's conference opponents at this juncture are combined 21-50 in league play.
Wow.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, and this is only going to become more of a cumbersome note when we get to the 18-team format, and I don't have any idea how I'll be able to sit down and do all the math on that. But I do believe that who you're playing in the league is as important as when you're playing them. And I think that, no offense to Joe and John, who have cultivated industries out of this, but Brian, I think that matters. I think it matters a lot. And we can get into the net on another episode, as they say. But that is a flawed metric that the only reason it's getting any traction is because it has the NCAA's name behind it.
Yep.
And they wanted to hide behind the veil of secrecy of how they've come up with it. Well, we know one thing. Duke beat Clemson by a point the other day and went down 1 in the net, and Clemson went up 3. Okay? Clemson went from being a Q2 game to a Q1 win for Duke by going up. Now, you tell me how that happens.
It's great, yeah. And especially, like, I feel November is now way, way, way more important than it should be in college basketball because stuff gets baked in now that you can't get rid of over the course of the year.
And, Brian, here's the other part, too. Look at who, and I'm just going to give you a team. Now, they got a great win this weekend over Kansas. Go look at Iowa State's non-conference schedule. Just go look at who Iowa State played and what their margin of victory was. And you tell me how Iowa State got to where they are. And you're going to sort it out. Because the way Iowa State, now granted, Kansas is a great win. I'm giving them full credit for that. But outside of Kansas, look at who they played in November and look at how bad they beat them. And if you start looking at the Big 12 in particular, they've gotten there, but they haven't gotten there with the kind of performance in the non-conference against Power 5 teams that, say, the ACC has. It's just what it is.
Yeah, I'm looking through. Their only good win non-con is Iowa. They lost to Virginia Tech. You'd think that would help out the ACC in some way.
All right, but look at who they beat though in the non-conference and how bad they beat them.
Yeah, I mean Green Bay, Lindenwood, Idaho State, Grambling. Yeah, they crushed a bunch of just terrible teams here.
The margins are unbelievable.
Yeah, huge. Clearly, that must have an effect on the numbers, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah, and if someone shows you the formula, that formula is locked up tighter than KFC's blends of herbs and spices. I think you're not going to get a look at that thing. All right, before I let you go, Wes, one football thing. Fran Brown, any thoughts on?
Holy cow.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking football in January in Syracuse. We don't know what to do with ourselves right now.
Well, as it's been reported, and bless folks, they may have seen, I get to do an occasional broadcast with Coach Boeheim. And we were in Blacksburg last Tuesday night, and like at Monday night, we were having a discussion about, just kind of Coach Brown's arrival. And he said, I've never seen a guy with the kind of enthusiasm and the way, he's got people believing and things of that nature. And if he's excited and sees it, that's a guy with 1,000 wins, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in. I do know I have a friendship with Kirby Smart because we've known each other a long time, being in the Atlanta market, and of course he's done a marvelous job at Georgia, as everybody knows. When Fran Brown left, he called me and I said, "Well, how's this guy going to be?" He said, "You're not going to believe it." So there you go. The "you're not going to believe it" from Kirby Smart is about as good as I can offer you, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. In fact, I think 3 or 4 of his coaches were on my flight to Atlanta yesterday around lunchtime, so I know they're back out on the road this week, and I firmly believe that the Orange will be really, really competitive. And I do believe this too, and I think this is part of it, of being a fan, Brian. You have to acknowledge the fact that even though they didn't win as many as you wanted to, he's probably finding the program in a better place, even in a different landscape, than the one that Dino found when he took over. I think that's part of this deal too, and you got to respect the fact that Fran Brown's come in and going to be able to capitalize on the foundation and some of that groundwork that was laid during Dino's tenure too.
Yeah, all facts. And Dino landed out in Arizona last week as their new offensive coordinator. I say I'll let you go with this, Wes. You mentioned Benny. Benny has certainly been talked about a lot. You tomorrow night, Wes, you are going to be talking about the most talked about Syracuse player of the last few years, because you'll be hanging with Joe Girard tomorrow night. He was our biggest point of conversation the last 3 years.
Yeah, no question. And I just walked out of their practice about 30 minutes ago, and Joe has obviously contributed to where Clemson is, and the Tigers want to get it turned around tomorrow night against Louisville. You hope they can, from a Tiger perspective, because this is as big a second half of the season as anybody in the ACC's got, is the one that Clemson faces for sure. All
right, we'll be watching tomorrow night. Your game's on right after our game tomorrow, so we got the little doubleheader tomorrow night on the ACC Network. All right, Wes, always good to chat. I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Brian.
All right,
take care, bud.
There he goes, Wes Durham. Wes on the call tomorrow night from Clemson. He's got Clemson in Louisville. Louisville's kind of the you just can't lose it game for any of the good teams in the ACC this year. So Clemson's got to go and get that one. Houston, BC at 7 will be his intro on ACC Network tomorrow night. With that, we'll take a break. We'll have we talked to Wes for a while. That tends to happen. We'll have a very brief 4-on-1 with Tim when we come back after this. It's QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio. All of this on this hour brought to you by our friends at DVOffers.com, powered by Drivers Village in Cicero.